quality e-learning experience on the go.
Application of science and technology in crop and animal improvement. Science is defined as the knowledge obtained through the observation and testing of factors which are arranged in an orderly manner. Technology is the application of scientific knowledge to production. In the role of science and technology in Nigerian agriculture, the role of science and technology can be felt in meteorology and climatology, in the use of tools and machinery, in transportation and communication, in the use of incubators and milking machines, in soil fertility management, in pest and disease control, harvesting, processing and storage, in irrigation and damming, in plant and animal breeding. Meteorology and climatology. The scientific study of weather is made possible through meteorology and climatology, and with that, weather can easily be predicted, while variations in climate from place to place could easily be accounted for. In the use of tools and machinery, the obsolete and crude implements used in agriculture are now being replaced or at least supplemented by machines in production. Therefore, the tediousness associated with agriculture is removed, since the use of machines, also known as mechanization, makes the work easier, faster, more accurate, etc. Tractor hiring units are also established by government to help farmers. In transportation and communication, through science and technology, good communication networks such as roads, bridges, and railways have been constructed to link the farm to the markets so that agricultural products could easily be marketed. Others are the radio, television, newspapers, and agricultural news, through which information is set out to the farmers and to the general public. In incubators and milking machines, incubators have been designed and used to incubate eggs to meet up with the high demand of poultry products. Incubators can hatch thousands of eggs at a time, as against the natural incubation where the hen hardly hatches more than 10 eggs at a time. Milking machines are now used for extraction of milk from dairy animals instead of using hands. Soil fertility and management. The scientific study of the soil has helped to determine nutrient deficiencies, organic matter content, soil pH level, etc. Different types of fertilizers and liming materials have been developed and now used to improve soil conditions for better and increased crop production. In pest and disease control, many farm products are lost every year due to weeds, pests, and diseases. Through science, man has learned through entomology, parasitology, and pathology to control pathogenic organisms like the fungi, the bacteria, insects, and nematodes through the use of chemicals like the fungicides, the bacterials, the insecticides, etc. Herbicides are also produced and used to control weeds, while drugs are used to inoculate or cure different diseases in farm animals. In harvesting, processing, and storage, harvesting and processing of certain agricultural products is now mechanized. For example, the use of combine harvester to harvest cereals, the oil palm press, etc. With regard to storage, farmers can now store their agricultural products for prolonged periods without spoilage. Some food items are stored by canning, some by freezing, etc. In irrigation and damming, science and technology has been applied in the designing, construction, and application of irrigation and damming to make agricultural production possible in the drier regions of the country and also during the dry seasons. Certain products like tomato are now produced all through the year as a result of irrigation and damming. Plant and animal breeding. Through science and technology, crop improvement has been used to produce new varieties of crops and livestock that are more productive, better adapted to the environment, and more disease resistant. This has increased productivity and ultimately improved agricultural development. Crop improvement. The continued increase in world population has led to increased demand for food to feed the teeming population. In man's effort to achieve this, he has applied his knowledge of science, especially genetics, to substitute the undesirable qualities or characteristics or traits in plants with desirable ones so as to result in higher yield of crops of improved quality. The aims of crop improvement include 1. To increase yield of crops, 2. To improve quality of produce, 3. To improve harvesting quality, 4. To adapt to adverse climatic conditions, and 5. To increase crop resistance to pests, diseases, and nematodes. To increase yield of crops, the idea is that there are crops that are more efficient in their use of plant nutrients than others. Since such crops yield a large quantity of produce per hectare of land, they should always be planted. And in improving quality of produce, consumers have continued to demand for improvement in the areas of palatability, the sugar content, texture, and food nutrients in order to satisfy the needs of modern man. For example, maize with higher protein and less chaff, and tomato with higher vitamin content are now being demanded. In improving harvesting quality, certain characteristics in crops may lend them more to the use of modern farming equipment. For example, many growers prefer dwarf varieties of sorghum, which could be harvested with machine, to the taller varieties. To adverse climatic conditions, varieties of crops are developed which are able to withstand extreme conditions of cold, drought, and wind. The growth cycle of some crops are adjusted to suit the growing season. And in the increase of crop resistance to pests, diseases, and nematodes, certain diseases of crops cannot be eradicated once they have occurred. The planting of resistant varieties of crops has provided the only feasible control method for such diseases. There are different methods of crop improvement, and they include introduction, selection, and crossbreeding or hybridization. In introduction, most of the crops cultivated today in our environment are not indigenous to Nigeria. They were rather imported into the country by traders and travelers. When such crops find the environmental conditions of their new environment similar to those of the original home, they survive and get adapted to the new environment. For example, the maize, cocoa were introduced to West Africa from Brazil in South America. These new crop varieties can also be used to cross-pollinate the local ones where they exist to produce crops that are vigorous, high-yielding, and disease-resistant. Newly introduced plant materials are now subjected to quarantine tests before their distribution. In selection, we have two types of selection. We have the mass selection and the individual plant selection. Selection is the oldest and commonest method of crop improvement. It is known that within any species of plants or animals, certain individuals do better than others. Therefore, plants with desirable character are selected from a group or a collection of plants, and the rest are discarded. Since in principle, like begets like, the fundamental differences in the quality of the plant material is used to select and increase the desirable types. The mass selection involves selecting a large number of individual plants which have desired characters, then sowing their seeds. Their progeny having the desirable character are also selected for subsequent planting and selection. And in individual plant selection, this involves selecting an individual crop with desirable characteristics, sowing the seed, and observing it. The seeds from the best plants produced are again collected, kept, and grown for subsequent selection of plants with the required characters. Crossbreeding or hybridization. This involves cross-pollinating two plants in order to produce a new plant which has inherited the qualities of two parent plants. This new plant is called a hybrid. This method of crop improvement is the most important because it makes it possible for desirable characters to be transferred from parents to their successive generations. For example, early maturity, disease resistance, tallness and shortness, and drought resistance, etc. Acquisition of these characters increases the commercial value of such crops. Crossbreeding is based on the Mendelian laws of heredity. Talking about Mendelian laws, through the research carried out by Gregory Mendel in 1865, he established how characters are transferred from parents to offspring. He used garden peas for his study. And in his first law, Mendel crossed tall and short plants and then collected and planted the seeds. All the first generation plants called F1 were tall. Tall character is said to be dominant, while shortness is said to be recessive. He then allowed them to cross and planted out the seeds. The second generation offspring, called the F2, had both tall and short plants in a ratio 3:1. This made him state his first law, which is the law of segregation. It states that when a cross is made between two forms of character, only one form will appear in the F1, while the two forms will appear in the F2 in a ratio of 3:1. In the second law of Mendel again crossed plants differing in two different characters. Tall and round-seeded plants were crossed with short wrinkled seeds. Only one form of plant, that is the tall and round-seeded plants, appeared in the F1. During the F2, the original plants reappeared in the ratio of 9:1. Two new plants also appeared in the ratio 3:3. This result led Mendel to state his second law, which is the law of independent assortment. This law states that when plants contrasting in two or more pairs of characters are crossed, the characters assort independently in the second filial generation. We have the advantages of introduction, and they are: 1. The introduced crops could be used to test whether such crops can adapt to the climatic and soil conditions. 2. The introduced crops usually have desirable characters and may be used in crossbreeding and updating poor local varieties. 3. The introduced crops could be planted directly in the field with the aim of achieving higher economic returns. The advantages of selection are: 1. It results in the retention of high-quality varieties. 2. Only species with desirable characteristics are allowed to grow. 3. The selected crops could be used for crop improvement. 4. It helps to select disease and pest-resistant crops. And 5. Vigorous species that are adapted to the environment are selected. The advantages of crossbreeding include: 1. It leads to the production of hybrid vigor. 2. It helps farmers to increase commercial value of crops by producing the quality of crops desired by consumers. And 3. It helps in the production of a genetically improved and superior crop variety. Animal improvement. Animal improvement is the production of animals with the specific desired traits to meet the requirements of livestock farmers and consumers. There are aims of animal improvement, and they include: 1. To produce quick maturing and highly prolific animals. 2. To produce animals that can supply large quantities of good quality eggs, meat, milk, skin, wool, etc. 3. To produce animals that are resistant to diseases, pests, adverse weather, etc. And 4. To produce animals that have high conversion efficiency. There are different methods of animal improvement, and they include the introduction, selection, breeding, or crossbreeding. They are all methods of animal improvement. Introduction is the movement of animals with desired qualities from their origin to another region where they can adapt. And selection is the process of choosing specific animals from a mixed population due to their desirable characteristics. The methods of selection include the mass selection, the pedigree selection, the progeny testing, the pure line selection, and the bulk selection. The mass selection is based on performance of the individual. The pedigree selection is based on the performance of their ancestors. Animals are selected for breeding. And in progeny testing, animals are selected based on the performance of their offspring. Breeding or crossbreeding. Breeding or crossbreeding refers to the gene improvement by transferring heritable qualities or characters from parents to offspring. In crossbreeding, the Muturu breed of cattle, which is resistant to trypanosomiasis, is mated with or crossed with the white Fulani cattle, which is open to the disease, to produce a hybrid which combines the good qualities of the two breeds. Other breeding methods include the inbreeding, the backcrossing, the line breeding, outbreeding, and upgrading.